Hello, hello. I am streaming. I'm Savannah. I'm a developer advocate at Redis. There is no one here, which is nice while I start getting set up. Oh, there are people here now. So I'm Savannah. I'm a developer advocate here at Redis. And, oh, that is still a little too small. Let me go and make that a bit bigger. So if you tune into Guy's streams regularly, we talked a little bit about probabilistic data structures while I was on there with him. And I'm going to sort of keep working on that app that we started, well, that I started and was walking through. Hello. And we talked about Bloom filters and we talked about cuckoo filters with the app in mind and looking at how those things work. Then Guy and I sort of branched off a little and looked at the top K structure and the Countman sketch structure from a sort of a little more theoretical standpoint. I think we interacted with Redis CLI some, but I'm going to sort of add some of those buttons to this little web app. It's right. Oh, that's the wrong button. Terminal. Right here. You can see right now the only buttons I've got are for the Bloom filter and the set. But as far as the URLs go, I've got, the Bloom size, the cuckoo size. We can check the cuckoo filter and we can get some cuckoo info. And then some of these are from some other Git pod applications that I've worked on in the past. I think the event by count is from a stream I did with Justin where we looked at food truck JSON data. Sorry, my cat keeps scratching at the back of my chair. So yeah, we're going to get started adding the top K and Countman sketch structures to this application. So the first thing I want to check out is the first thing I want to think about is what data I'm going to use to check out those. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of setup. I'm going to go ahead and call this top K. And these deletes just make sure that when I start and stop and restart my Flask application, it doesn't yell at me like, oh, I can't create that filter because that key already exists. So we're just going to delete that key, and then we'll do an r dot. Ooh, and here's a good question. Already, I don't know the top K syntax for Redis Pi. So Redis Pi has some solid documentation. So I'm going to just Google GitHub Redis Pi. It'll be right there. And one of these recent commits, if you go look at them, says that they were deprecating Redis Bloom because Redis Bloom is now fully integrated with Redis Pi. You don't have to import Redis Bloom anymore. So I'm going to go look at Redis commands. BF is for Bloom filter, although it includes Bloom filters, cuckoo filters, and some of these other probabilistic data structures. So let's scroll down to top K commands. Okay, so we're going to reserve a new top K filter key with a desired probability, expected entries as size. Okay, well that says width, depth, and decay. Do I actually need those? I guess we could also go look at the handy dandy commands page. That's probably a little bit easier to read than the source code. Key and a number of items to keep. Okay, so those are all optional, which means that when we look at the size of this thing, there's probably going to be a lot that we could optimize for. But we're going to keep the defaults for now. Maybe that's something we will explore over the next 2 hours. So this is where I needed the command, though. Top K. Is it top? It's probably not a full top K. So like Bloom filter is like the R for the Redis connection dot BF for Bloom filter. The cuckoo is CF. Maybe let's try top K. R dot top K. There we go. Dot reserve. And we'll call it top K. And we're going to put 1,000 things in it. Cool. So that's pretty simple. I guess the next thing we're going to want to do is add things to it. So we'll follow this same pretty simple Flask app structure where anything that you define as an app.route, this will make this URL something you can hit. So as soon as I add /add top K, and this is a variable for that Flask app route, I can say def add top. Well, maybe while we're here, let's hit save on this. You're going to auto reload. Flask will sometimes auto reload if that app.py file changes, but not all the time. Okay, so required positional arguments. Okay, so it might say in the Redis CLI, it might be that those are all optional, but it looks like here those are all required. But this command still gives me defaults, so I'll go 8, 7, and 0.9 if that's the right order. It seems like it is. So we'll go 8, 7, 0.9. And try to start it now. Cool. This is already open somewhere, but that's fine. And I want to see what happens if I do add top K / Savannah. Okay, so that's interesting. It says check added, even though I haven't defined anything. So it might default to this, which is interesting. That's something I'm actually going to make a note to check out about Flask later. Flask apps and sort of UIs are not my normal bread and butter. You will notice that the UI is very rough. I'm hoping to clean that up a little bit today, maybe get it a little more polished. So like these intricacies of Flask, if someone has a comment about why, if it does just sort of default to that next thing, that'd be cool. Otherwise, I'm going to make a note to explore that later. Flask. Function. So does Flask default to the next function? So then we're going to write our add top K. And we need to pass in the thing that the same thing that we're passing into this URL. So these variables are going to be the same. If I was writing this for like if I was writing this for production, these would all be different variables. That way, you could guarantee that it was going to be this thing. You would have like thing 1 and thing 2. Better programming is probably to have different variables for all of these, just so that you can isolate problems easier. You can make sure that the variables are what you think they are and being used where you think they are. But for our little demo exploration into probabilistic data structures, it's mostly fine. But it does mean that it could easily default to this function because I'm using the same variable. So to add to our top K filter, we're going to go r.topk dot probably add. Add. Cool. And we can add a few items at once. So that is something to note here about the top K filter. Some of the other structures here have an madd function. It's like the Bloom filter With the add function, it's a single item all the time, just the one. If you use madd, you can add multiple items. But some of the other ones are variadic, where you could have a list essentially of items. It doesn't have to be an actual list, I don't think. I think you can just pass a bunch of items. So it's just dot add the thing. Promise I know how to spell thing. So this is where we can probably do this same thing, where if that got added, we'll return that we checked and it was added. Some of this check variable name is left over from when, or not left over, but is used a little more for the UI and some of the displays I was trying to do with the UI. So I'm leaving that variable name as checked because we might do that later. And Redis, it's Redis Pi. It's really just the Python, I don't want to say wrapper for Redis. It's not a wrapper. It's just the, oh goodness. It's basically a Python wrapper for Redis. So up here, I just imported Redis, but that's because I have pip installed PyRedis, the client library. There you go. My Flask project. I'm not sure what the question is. But yeah, so Flask apps are cool. Anyways, so we'll check this. I'm assuming this will return a 1, but we can check right here. It returns this self.execute command, which is the same for all of these things. So this will return a 1 if it's successful, and not a 1 if it's not successful. And in Python, I can evaluate statements like this, where 1 is true, or like 1 is true, essentially, in Python. So if that returns that 1, you get that check. Otherwise, we'll return could not add. So I don't actually know why top K would fail, because top K, every time you, well, let's see. So top K has an add and an anchor by. So can I add the same thing twice in top K? Let's find out. So in this terminal, I've also got the Redis CLI open. Is that big enough? Yeah. So I'll make that a little bit bigger. Let me know in a comment if you guys can't see. I guess this is a little small. Let me increase that size. But for Redis CLI, I'm going to do a top k.reserve. And since according to this documentation, the only parameters I have to have are the key and the number of top occurring items to keep. That's all I'm going to give it. Top K test. And let's go 10. Do top K dot add. Top K test. 1. Interesting. Okay. Top K dot add. Oh, it returns nil. Okay. So items to be added. Multiple items can be added at once. If an item enters the top K list, the item which is expelled is returned. This allows dynamic hitter detection. So it's not going to tell me if that was actually like successful or not. Let's see what we can do a little bit with top K test, item 1. And it's 2. Okay, so using add, essentially is like an anchor by of 1. Probably. Hopefully. So this is probably never going to fail. It's probably more like this cuckoo filter where you can add the same thing as many times as you want. But we'll leave that. Well, let's run it. Let's see. So since the Redis Pi source code says that it's going to return that self.execute command, I think we'll get a 1 there if it's successful. Oh, nope, I'm wrong. Okay. Oh, wrong number of arguments for top K add. Ah, yes, well, I do actually have to pass it the key name as well. And then we'll go /top K / nope, I called it add top K / Savannah. Okay, cool. So it's returned check added, which means that as far as so that's an example of this client library and how it sort of is a wrapper, because this Redis CLI gave us a nil back when we added something, but from Redis Pi we got a 1 back. So just like a couple of little things like that are sort of the main differences with what the different client libraries do. Yeah. Cool, so that got added. It's probably never going to fail, but I'll leave that check in there just in case. Who knows? Maybe we'll discover a case where it fails while we're here. So, excuse me, if you're looking at this code, you can see that we were checking the cuckoo filter and checking the bloom filter because those probabilistic data structures check for membership. They just check in to see whether or not something probably exists in those data structures. So because the top K structure doesn't do membership, it does counts. Instead of check top K, we'll make an app.route for count top K. Oh, count top K. That's fine. /thing. And we'll define count top K with the thing. Maybe one of these days you'll do live coding. This is the first time I've been on stream by myself. It is not as intimidating as I thought it would be. It is already, it's not as scary once you just start doing it. It's a little bit like talking to yourself while coding and then just sort of keeping an eye on a chat in another screen. Or at least that's what I'm doing so far. So to get the count of a top K thing in Redis Pi, it's probably just count. Check whether 1 item or more. Oh, so we can query. Interesting. For more information on top K query. So I guess before trying to get a count of an object, we could see if it exists. Or no, sorry, this checks whether an item is one of the top K items. So the top K query we could have, let's go to the CLI for a second. I just want to ignore that window. Give me this one. So we've got top k.count. We added item 1. We'll do top, let's see. I said 10 items. Oh, that's a lot. Let's go top k.reserve. Top k small. And let's just say 1. So top K small, I can add as many things to it as I want. And it will keep those counts. But the only thing that query will ever return is the top 1. And it will only it will only tell me if an item is that top thing. So what do I mean by that? Top K.add, top K small, item 1, item 2, So here it's returning this item 1 because item 1 got kicked out. So we can see here in this implementation, in the Redis implementation of the top K data structure, if something has the same count as our top 1 in this case, or if we had 10, if something has the same count of one of those things, it'll prioritize the new thing. So when I'm going to add item 3, it's going to return item 2 because item 2 got kicked out. We'll add item 4, item 5, and then if I do top K dot query top K small, and we say item 1, it says nope, it's not the first thing. But also if I do item 6, which I haven't added item 6 to this filter or this data structure. I think it's a sketch filter. It's a table. Well, it's a table and also a min heap structure that keeps track of the top things. So if I ask it for item 6, though, I get the same response. Item 6 hasn't been added to this structure at all. So all it really knows, though, all it's going to tell me is that item 6 is not my top thing. If I do a top K dot add to top K small and do item 1, item 5 gets kicked out. And now if I do a query on item 1, it says yes. So now if you extended this, instead of having the top 1 item all the time, and you had, say, the top 5, the only thing you can ask, well, the only thing you can ask with the query command is this thing that I'm asking for in one of the top K items? So here we only maintained one thing, so that's why every time we were adding these, it was getting kicked out. If I had set this to 5, these would all return nils because you can add that many things and they're all in the top K. So we can query to see whether or not something is in the top number. So let's add that. No, let's do the count. You can just ask for a count and see what returns the count for an item. Multiple items can be requested at once. This number will never be higher than the real count, but it is likely to be lower. So, and what does it return? Just an integer? Okay. So we'll say C for count equals R dot top K dot nope. So it didn't auto-populate count. It's there though. Okay. Dot count. And our top K is called top K, comma thing. And then we'll return check C. So now let's save this. The one thing that's nice about this, URLs must start with leading slash. I know that. One thing that's nice, what I was saying about it being a Flask app, is that when I shut this down and restart it, all of my data is still there. I'm still connected to the same Redis instance that I've got running. I'll pull it over real quick. I've got a Redis Bloom image from Docker, or a Redis Bloom Docker container. So like this is running the whole time. So shutting down and starting up that Flask app, like all my data stays. So when I go here and ask for the count of Savannah, well, that's because I need to add top K to that word count. Top K count. What did I call it? Count top K. Man, it's almost like I picked a naming convention and I did not stick to it. You know, like check set, but then cuckoo info. Naming conventions are nice. Oh no. Either the server is overloaded or there's an error in the application. It's probably an error in the application. Function object has no attribute count. That's because I didn't add these little parentheses. So that's an easy fix. Save it, kill it, restart it. Okay. Reload. Oh, 0. Okay, well, that's somewhat unexpected. Let's try adding it to my top K. And then counting it. Okay, so maybe somewhere in there I did, in fact, delete that data. Or that add didn't do what I thought it did, but regardless. Okay, so now it should, if I add it again and try the count again, now we're at 2. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So now we'll add a query for the top K. Oh, that's not how you spell route. Slash query top K. K thing. Def query. Okay. With the thing. Thank God for the hard work of others. Happy to use other people's work. Absolutely. If you're using Redis, I don't actually know what RabbitMQ is, but there are a lot of sort of they're called modules in Redis. So like I was saying, how this one, Redis Bloom, is already incorporated into Redis Pi. If one of the other developer advocates is in the chat, I'm not sure if all of the other libraries have Redis Bloom by default, or if you have to import Redis Bloom explicitly in like Node.js, JavaScript, or anything. So I'm only going to speak to Python. So this module is already incorporated, but even before that got incorporated with Redis Core Pi, you had to import Redis Bloom explicitly, and there are a couple of other modules like that. So we've got Redis Ohm, which is object management, and it's sort of, it makes objects. A message broker. Oh, interesting. So Redis Ohm makes objects, and that's really helpful for querying and search. And it looks like Node Redis has Redis Bloom support built in. So I'm not sure if Redis Bloom is actually really its own module anymore, or if it's baked into all of the core libraries at this point, or all of the core client libraries at this point. But there are a couple of other modules where you can explicitly ask for certain features of Redis. And that's pretty cool. Somewhere out there, there's a Redis Edge Docker image, which sort of contains things that are like, they're on the edge. We're not really incorporating them fully yet. It's sort of a little bit of a use at your own risk. It's things that aren't as well documented, mostly. So query the top K. So this query is just going to tell us whether or not it's in the top number. So this is just going to be a true false. So we'll just return check r.topk dot query thing. So this should just return either a 0 or a 1, which if we were being fancy, I would probably say like set a function equal to this, and if it's a 1, print like check, it's in the top, or false, it's not in the top thing. But as it stands, I can just return that value. So we'll query top K. Savannah. No, we won't. Wrong number of arguments. Oh, yep. Because I still have to pass even though this is the only top K structure I'm using, because I'm actually connected to the same Redis instance, I'm 97% sure that I could use one of these that I've reserved in this Redis CLI. Maybe we'll try that after I make sure this works as I'm expecting it to. Still a server error. Wrong number of arguments. Did I save? I saved. Oh, did I might not have killed it and started it. Query top K, Savannah. Check that thing. Refresh. Okay, there we go. So it says 0. Cool. But what I should make this larger. What I can't do is I can't just say like, hey, what is the top K thing? Well, not yet. I can't because I don't have that function implemented yet. So let's make a list, and it returns the K or less items in the top K list. So list top K, and I can do the with count. So with count defaults to false. Let's go true. So we'll make another app route for / list top K. And we don't need any variables there. Top K list. And we're going to just return I don't really need that variable at this point. It's just sort of aesthetics and for if I decide to display that information in the UI later. That's annoying to type out, so I'm going to drop it. So instead, we're just going to return r.k.list top K, and I'm going to set with count equal to true. And we'll see how it goes. So we don't need any variables. We just need to type list top. Okay. Oh, an unhashable type list. Oh, okay. Well, let's return the string of that at 0. Try that. This will just return us, well, I actually don't know if it's an ordered list. It probably is. List indices must be integers or slices, not list out, because I accidentally did double brackets. List index out of range. Okay, so it doesn't exist, which is weird. So if I do query top K for Savannah, now we're back to 0. So maybe I'm totally wrong about it saving. Well, it says it's got a 1. So what if we add it again? Am I just not? Is my app broken? No. So this query for top K for Savannah is returning a 1, which means it's in our top K list. So theoretically, well, not theoretically, according to the documentation, if I do list top K, I should get back that thing. Okay, but now it's the view function did not return a valid response. The return type must be a string dict tuple response instance, but it was a set. But I said to make it a string. All right, well, we'll come back to that one. Are there other top K functions? We'll do anchor by next. Maybe that'll help us figure out what's going on. Passed it to a list. So this should already be a list. So that was that was one of the first errors. Yeah, so that was one of those first errors, was that it's an unhashable type of list, so I can't just return that. Yeah, so if you're not watching on YouTube, there's some helpful hints in the comments. Error says it's a set unless I'm missing something. So that was the error at one point. I think that was when I had indexed at 0. But now, you know, when I just ran this most recently, it's that it's an unhashable type of list. So what if I do, I will say this is where Python can just get silly. If I get the list and get the first thing in the list and then make that a string. List index out of range. So this should mean that there's nothing in the list. But we know there's something in the list because when we query the top K for Savannah, unless it is deleting everything every time. Okay, Savannah added. Let's add it a few more times for good measure. And if I do count top K Savannah, it's there 3 times. Cool. If I do list top K, the view function did not return a valid response. And so now it's a set, but I don't know why that is returning a set. That seems to me like it should explicitly be a string, but let's instead we can break this up into multiple steps. So top list equals this. I guess first we could return the length of my top list. Nope, not the whole top K list, just top list. And this is where I'm not actually 100% sure if I should use the len function or if I should do top K top list dot length, but that's okay. We'll find out. Kill that and restart it. So sometimes Flask will like automatically kill the app when this app.py file changes. I might have messed something up in my configuration because it is clearly not doing that right now. Oh, it's because it's production environment. Hold on. On the side over here, I'm going to Google Flask environment variable development debug environment variable. Somewhere I have done this a lot. Flask env equals development. So I'm going to kill this, do that, and now we'll see if it automatically starts restarting for me. Same thing. view function did not return a valid response. Sterling. And yeah, in a second here. Oh, and so it did not automatically start. The environment is still production. Why is that? Environment is still production. Interesting. Well, I will mess with that on other time. So if we try to add top K Savannah, we get it added. So that's promising. At some point. Sorry, I'm reading these comments over here. Yeah, I believe Flask env equals development is, ooh, export. That's a fair. There we go. Good call. Thank you for that export add. So, okay. We'll add Savannah. Cool. Oh, interesting. And now because it's a development, we get slightly different formatting. Let's list top K. Okay. So because it is production, or sorry, because it's now not production, we can do print type top list. It should be a list. And then we can print type top list at 0. So that should give us the type of the first thing in the list. And now here you'll see, because it's in that development environment, the Flask app auto restarted for us, which is what I want right now. Obviously, if you are actually using Flask in a production environment, you probably don't want every single change to restart your app. So let's see what happens when let's see what gets printed if I try this now. We should get class list. Cool. List index out of range. So I guess this list is empty. So apparently this list is empty. But why is this list empty? Command Z. Type of that at 0. It's out of range. Cool. That definitely means that this list is empty. So let's do a Redis CLI. And what I want to do is monitor this. So, oh, I should make this bigger. So the monitor command is going to show what, oh geez, that's fine. It'll show like the actual commands getting sent to Redis and their responses. So I'm going to just do this and hit. Okay, cool. So we got the top K list of top K with count. That's exactly what I was expecting. What if we do top K dot list? Okay. Empty array. Okay. So is it me? Or is it that the app is deleting? Or not that the app is deleting the data, that it's not actually persisting. The correct key param Yep, it's just the same. It's just called top K. That's what I'm querying. That's what I'm counting. That's what I am adding to is just top K. So it might be that for whatever reason, it's not holding on to that data. Let's do count top K, Savannah. Yeah, so we're back to 0 for the count. So it might just be something. It might be that I was totally wrong and that the Flask app shutting down does actually like delete all of the data every time. Okay, so topk.add. We've gotten that a few times. Cool. Count top K Savannah. We've got 4. Cool. So if we list top K, and now it's a type error again. Okay, so I think if we returned this is explicitly a string. Okay, I'm moving on from that. That's like a super, yeah. The server Redis should be independent. I agree, and it seemed that way when we were doing this last time with the Bloom filter and the Cuckoo filter. So I'm not totally sure what's going on there. And also the fact that, like, for whatever reason, this is not making sense to me. The view function did not return a valid response. The return type must be a string, blah, blah, blah. I'm explicitly casting it to a string. So what if we do this again? Okay. So that's cool. Okay, so progress. When we do topk.list, top K over here, now it does give back Savannah. So why isn't this working? Nope, I'm still going to move on. We're going to do app.route for what else can we do? Let's do info. Info is a cool little way to just sort of see some information about your top K filter. It doesn't give you the size, which the other, like the Bloom filter and the Cuckoo filter, both like tell you the size in that info command. And the time to live for the key, it should, for the top K, like that, it should always be there. Like the top K doesn't actually, like, you can't delete a key because of how the data is stored. So I guess I'll back up a little bit and explain a little bit more about like how top K looks. Top K is, let me check my notes just to make sure I get it right. But it's sort of 2 separate structures that work together. You have pretty much a table that has a fingerprint and a count for every item that's been added. And then you have a min heap that whenever something gets added, that highest count gets checked against the top K min heap. And if it needs to get added to that min heap, then it does. And that's why you see things get returned, because it means that they got popped out of the top K. So then once that thing gets popped out of the top K, you've got a new set of things in top K. It's like you can't really delete or decrement those values just because they end up, they get hashed, they get incremented interestingly, weirdly, mathematically, and that's why this is a probabilistic data structure. If we added enough things enough times and had enough collisions, we would end up with these counts that were a little bit lower than they should be. And the key add, yeah, I'm spelling my name a bunch, so I think I'm spelling it right every time. I could be wrong. I have definitely misspelled my own name. but I think adding that key and checking for it in the query has all been the same. And because here, like when we interact with the Redis CLI, that top K list is Savannah. So I'm not sure why this isn't a valid string. So instead, we're just going to do the top K info. And then, let's see, it's 250. So yeah, perfect. After we do this top K, let's do info top K to try and keep a slightly more consistent naming scheme. Info top K. After this, I will hop into some count min sketch programming. And let's see if I look at, oh, this probably would have been helpful. Returns full list. Returns full list with, oh, so that's probably why, is because I said with count. It's probably not just a list of items. So actually, let's comment this out. I'm just going to put return none and comment it out. I just don't like having functions that don't have any return values, even if they're commented out. So instead, if I delete this, I bet fresh. Nope, this index data range. Okay. Query top K for Savannah, and it's not there. And that's the only thing we've added to this thing. So there's something else going on there that I don't understand and don't want to continue fumbling around with in front of you lovely folks. So we'll get, but the reason I went to look at this is to see, it says it returns K, the width, the depth, and decay values of K. I don't know what structure that's going to be in. So let's go print r.topk.info. Okay. Save all. Go over here and ask for info top K, and it's not going to return anything. I didn't actually set a return value. Return none. Save all. Restart it. Cool. Info top K. No. Info top K. Well, I guess since it doesn't return anything, cool, but it should have printed. It did not print anything. Oh, wait, it might have. Trace back to the most recent call. Let's see, we got a redis.commands.bfinfo topkinfo object. So let's see if I can do like dot width. This is a stab in the dark. And hit enter over here. 8. Cool. Okay. So we can do width equals that. And really what we could do is do like top K info equals a dictionary, and then do top K info at width equals that. And then we'll copy, paste it, and we'll do depth. And we'll do decay. And then we'll return that dictionary. I think it's kind of interesting that they have this command because we saw earlier, yep, there's the decay, the depth, and the width. So I think it's sort of interesting that they have this command, although I guess because with the Redis CLI, you don't have to explicitly say those things. It could be helpful. So with the Redis Pi client library, I had to specify all of those things to reserve my top K filter. So like those numbers, those are all explicit in my code. Right there, 8, 7, and 0.9. 8, 7, and 0.9. But over here where we were doing like this top K small, where I just said like reserve it to have one item in the top K, if I do top K dot info, top K small, it should have all of the same numbers because these are the defaults. And it does. So K is 1, where that's literally just I specified that I wanted that min heap to hold only the top thing. So K is 1, our width is 8, depth is 7, decay is 0.9, with a lot of zeros and then a 2. So cool. So if, I don't know, I guess it's nice to have that information. I don't think top K scales. So with the Bloom filter and the Cuckoo filter, if you reach a certain level of, I'll say fullness, like if you've added a certain number of things, I know with the Bloom filter, it's once you hit 50% of the bits set, the Bloom filter will automatically scale up to another size, because once you hit 50% of the bit set, if we're talking about probabilistic membership, you're going to start getting a lot more false positives. Similar with the Cuckoo filter, it will auto scale to a larger size. I don't think top K definitely doesn't say anything about that. It's more, so that's where this decay comes in, the probability of reducing a counter in an occupied bucket. So I don't really know why I want that info command, because I have to either explicitly set these or like these are the defaults, but I guess it's nice to, you know, do the .info instead of going and looking at the documentation to know what the defaults are. And since I couldn't get list to work, anchor by is not hard. We could do that one. We could knock that out pretty quickly. So the anchor by is sort of like the add, except instead of adding one thing or adding like 1 to the value, as we saw, if you add something that's already in the filter, it increments that count by 1. Here we can say anchor by, and then we need 2 variables here. We need the thing you want to increment, and we need the thing, or no, the thing you're incrementing and how much you're incrementing it by. So, and then we'll have a num here, and that will be def incur top K with the thing and the num. And that syntax looks like key items increments. Okay, so here's one where it is, you know, you could pass lists, and it looks like I would pass a list of keys and then a list of things to increment them by. So we'll do r.topk.anchor by. Our key is still top K, and then thing, and then num. And realistically, let's go ahead and return count top K of thing. That works. So anchor by returns that self.execute, so it should be either a 1 or a 0 if it's successful or not. I'm going to go and say, let's just return what that new count becomes. So that is saved, and Flask has restarted it for us. So if we go here and we, did I actually call it? I called it just anchor by. That's fine. Anchor by / Savannah / 5. String index out of range. Oh no. Increments at I. Oh, do I have to pass them as a list even though it's only one thing? Okay, so even though it's only one thing in each list, you still have to pass it as a list because realistically that code probably, like underneath here, this append items and increments probably loops through a list and it's expecting a list, so you have to give it a list. Cool, okay. So aside from this list function for the top K, which for whatever reason doesn't see this as a string, I'm going to be mad about it all day, but it's fine. Those are the top K commands. Before, I suppose, I move on to the Countman sketch commands. Any questions about top K? It's pretty cool. I guess on that note about top K, let's see. What did I want to add about that? Yeah, so top K is often used for like monitoring network traffic, where you know, if you're adding IP addresses over and over again, you know what the top couple of IP addresses are that are hitting like your network, like eating up your bandwidth, potentially causing DDoS, whatever. But you don't want to actually store a bunch of information about it. You're just sort of adding that IP address over and over. And that IP address is really all you're adding. So you can get that IP address back when you do that query for like the top list. You know, you can say like, okay, what are the top 5 IP addresses hitting my network right now? And it'll give you the top 5. So that's like one potential application. Simon said with the list, oh, do I? List top K. So that return, oh, I guess maybe that's why I had, maybe that's why I had that check there all the time. List top K. List index out of range. But if I do add top K Savannah, add her again, and now I do list top K. Okay. So now I got the length of the list top K. So yeah, Simon, you are totally right with that list. Because I didn't have this, it thought this, like this type was just wrong. So that's why when you add this, it now is a dictionary with like an actual key value pair instead of being like a dictionary where there's not a key value pair, so it's not a dictionary, so it didn't know what to do. So good call. Top K list at 0 if it's empty. Let's find out. Top K dot reserve test dot test. I don't know. We'll say we want the top 10, and then top K dot list. Oh, okay. So top K list at 0 if it's empty. That is definitely not a valid call. Yeah, that's fine. So that's where I had at one point the list index out of range. I think it's probably still this list index out of range. That's what happens when you try to access it at 0. So if this were a production environment and I was saying like, you can run whatever commands you want to try, what I would need to do is something like if top list dot empty. Let's Python list is empty. Pretty sure. Length is easy. Let's use length. So if this was a production environment, I would want to say like if the length of top list equals 0, I can return empty list cannot get, or so, it's not really an empty list, it's an empty top K, cannot get top K. I would add something like that to keep this from breaking with this list index out of range. And then this would just be an else. Those were for debugging. So we would do something like that if we were more concerned about people breaking it and not knowing why it was breaking. Okay, cool. So I'm going to make a lot of space. And up here, I'm going to add a new r.delete, delete CMS. CMS is short for Countman Sketch. And I believe it's another .reserve, not a .create, but let's find out. Is this, that's the cuckoo filter, and then top K. That's T digest that we're not going to talk about today for a myriad of reasons. Countman Sketch commands. So we can initialize Countman Sketch by either the dimensions, so a width and a depth, or we can initialize it by an error rate and a probability. So let's look at these slightly easier to read documents. And we can filter them down to Countman Sketch. So the number of counters in each array, which reduces the error size, and the number of counter arrays, which reduces the probability for an error of a certain size. So I guess to start off with, a Countman Sketch is basically a table full of zeros, where each row in the table represents a different hash function. And every time you add something, it gets hashed by however many rows there are, the depth, and on each row, a singular cell will be incremented. So that hash function will be basically modulisted. We use the modulo function to make that hash function fit into one of those cells. That number will get incremented. And then when you query the Countman Sketch, it will hash that same thing, get back the counts of each row, and return the minimum. That minimum is because, you know, if my Countman Sketch only has 20 buckets wide, then, you know, as soon as I add 20 things, there's going to be a collision, which realistically means that I shouldn't have a 20 wide Countman Sketch if I'm planning on putting 20 things in it. But, you know, collisions happen. So because that collision happens, it's probably not going to happen in every row because I'm using different hash functions. So if there's a collision in rows, let's say 1 and 3, but row 2 still has the same value, you return the minimum, which is row 2. So Countman Sketch is going to, it's going to end up being an overestimate still, because the more things you add, the more likely it is that something else potentially will have collided with the thing in row 2 and will have incremented it for some other reason. But, it tries to sort of mitigate that damage by giving you the minimum count that it stores for a given item. So we can define it by the width and the depth, and that's basically our table size. Like when you go in like when you click like insert table and it says like how many rows and how many columns do you want. That's essentially how we can define this. Theirs has 2000 by 5, so 2000 wide, and then 5 different hash functions. We can also init it by the probability, where we have an error rate, and then the probability, which is the desired probability for an inflated count. So that's sort of the probability that we'll have those collisions. The closer this number is to 0, the greater the memory consumption per item, and the more CPU usage per operation. So let's do that. 0.001 and 0.01, that works for me. And is it create or reserve? Oh, it's init by prob. Init by prob. CMS 0.001, 0.01. Yeah, we're not going to do anything too crazy. So the closer this number is to 0, the greater the memory consumption. 0.01, we'll be fine. We're not trying to put too much in here. Cool. So let's start incrementing things. So one interesting thing that I think about the Countman sketch is that there's no just like add. You can do an incre by 1, but there's not just an actual like add this thing to my Countman sketch. You always have to provide what you want to increment the counter by. So let's start there in my big empty space. App.route. // That's the wrong slash. CMS incre by, because I already called the other one just incre by. And so here we'll need the thing we're incrementing and the number we're incrementing it by. You'll see a lot of these do have a lot in common with their syntax, which is nice. So really, once you start learning these probabilistic data structures, it makes it a lot easier to learn the other ones. Incre by makes sense. Add, reserve, info. There's a lot of overlap in sort of the information that you can ask these things. The applications are just really different. It's like I mentioned earlier, like the Bloom filter and the cuckoo filter. And that's terrible. I called that cuckoo info, but it gets the Bloom info. So we're just going to delete that. The Bloom filter and the cuckoo filter test for set membership, not set membership, but essentially they test for membership, where it says either no, the thing is definitely not in here, or the thing might be in here, or there might be a collision. Where Countman Sketch and Top K are more about trying to keep counts of things probabilistically, and there's also collisions, but different functions and different purposes. So Bloom filters are used for, like, my favorite example is that Google Chrome uses a Bloom filter to check malicious URLs. So whenever you go to a URL in Chrome, it first checks a Bloom filter to see if that URL might be malicious, because there are no false negatives. So it'll say, no, it's not, let you through, no problem. Or it'll say, it might be. And then I'm a little unclear on what exactly Google Chrome's implementation is, but I know they could have a set running in the background where if there's a hit for the Bloom filter, it goes and checks the set. But that set's going to be really big. That set takes up a lot more space. So you might not be able to store it in your browser cache, whereas a Bloom filter is just an array of bits. So it can potentially be stored in browser cache. I don't know if Chrome does that, I'm not talking about their implementation of the Bloom filter. I'm just saying they use one. But like the Kalman sketch, that's, just this whole other thing where instead of trying to check for membership, I'm going to say, hey, how many times have I added this thing? Like, what's the current count of this thing? So Kalman sketch can be used for leaderboards and other things like that, where I'm incrementing things, and then I can say like, okay, well, how many times have I incremented this? What is the current count? Probabilistically, of course, it's not an exact count. So we'll start there. CMS, goodbye. I know some of my fellow developer advocates call it anchor B, but I think that's silly because I'm incrementing it by a certain number. And we're going to do r.cms.anchor by. I didn't add an R in either of those places. Anchor by, and our key is CMS. We've got the thing we want to increment and the num we want to increment it by. It is silly. That's the point. Okay, fair. I guess that's fair, So I'm wondering if this is another one. Yes, so even though there's only one thing, I'm going to have to put them as lists because I could do multiple at once. It's trying to look for a list. What do we want to return from that? We'll do query. Yeah, we'll return the query of that item, which means we're going to have to write the query function as well. Well, it doesn't. We don't have to. We could do another like r.cms.query, but we're going to write the query function anyways. So we can go ahead and do r.cms.query CMS, thing, and we should be able to just return that. It looks like it'll return an integer. So we'll return CMS query of the thing. So I've written this function, but I haven't added the app.route, which I don't have to do. I can have like the supporting functions in this file. So actually, yeah. So let's just see that does in fact work. Put my money where my mouth is, so to speak. And what command did I just write? CMS anchor by. CMS anchor by Savannah. And let's go 10. Oh. Well, apparently this is not an integer. Well, let's try just making it a string. And then we'll do that again. Cool. So now it gave us 10. And that might be one of those like, because the .query command also can give back a number of things, it might just automatically always return a list. So it gave us a list back, and that's not a string. So cool. We did that. I'm curious if that means what I actually want, though, is this result at 0. That also might be an integer. It's not. Okay. Oh, it is an integer. Okay. Which this really will just get rid of the brackets. Cool. But, so now if we anchor by 10 again, now we get 20. So that's cool. This will also need to be a string, as we just saw. And we can make this an explicit app.route with CMS query and the thing. And we've already tested it technically because we have already called this function and seen what happens. So if I was better at Flask apps, I might know how to pass a list of things here, but I don't know how to do that, so we're not going to do that. And it also seems hard to do with a URL. That doesn't really seem like something I would try to pass a list in through a URL. So we're going to ignore it. What else can we do with CMS? We can merge them together. Oh, that one's kind of fun. Okay, so actually, we're going to write functions for the initialization of this one, because what we can do is if they have the same width and depth, we can merge them together. And I think if so, we can use the info command to get the width and the depth of one. So even if we use the probability to initialize one of them, we can then get the width and depth and make our other one that same size. But also if we initialize two that have the same probability, they'll inherently have the same dimensions as well. So let's, for simplicity's sake, we're just going to write init by dim. But we're going to make it so that like whoever was hypothetically using this one day could initialize their own Countman sketch with whatever key name they want. And then they could also merge two that they make with different key names together. So we'll go app.route /CMS init dim, and then we'll need a name and a width and a depth. And then we'll def init CMS with the name, the width, and the depth. And then we will, I think I initted by probability up here. I did. Okay, so then it's r.cms.init by dim name. I think it's width and depth. We'll go for it. Width, depth. Does this return anything? It returns okay. So if this will return check string made CMS name, and this is Python, so I can just make that an F string. Cool. So we should probably test that before I try to merge things made like that. CMS init by dim. No two slashes, init by dim. We'll go test 1, and we'll go 10 by 10. Cool. When we check it, we made CMS test 1, and then we'll make test 2, also 10 by 10. Cool. And then in test 1, oh no. So we're going to have to change these functions because we need to add the name. And realistically, if this was a production environment, you know, all of these things would have to be variables because you can't. Is name a keyword? Oh, I didn't pass it in here. Name. Oh no, I'm not going to sneeze. Okay, sorry. I was like panicking trying to find the mute button, but I did not sneeze, so we're all good. Name. Nice stream. Thanks. It's my first time streaming by myself. Does Redis Inc. also stream dev examples using Go? I think we have. I don't think we have anyone that primarily does Golang right now. But what we do have is a Discord where you can join us, and there is a Go specific Discord channel where you can get a lot of help by people that specifically use Go for Redis. So, okay, added that name. So now what I should be able to do is oh, well, I guess I need to save this. Hold on. Save it. It'll restart. Cool. And then we'll do CMS anchor by. That Savannah 10 is cool, but I need to do test 1. Oh, no. Oh, so because I added that, I need to add it there. That makes sense. Restart. Do that. Oh, no. I was expecting that to still give me 10. One of us should learn Go on stream and do Redis things with it. Maybe you'll tackle it soon. I've done a minimal amount of Go development. I did a decent amount of work in Java at one point for college courses, and also C and C++. So like, it's not as hard as C. You don't have to ask for every byte of memory you want, which is nice. But yeah, we definitely have talked about Go. We've done a little bit. We've got that Discord channel. But yeah, we might start tackling that on stream some. Okay, so why did that change though? Turn the string. So what if we query it? What if we do CMS query test 1 for Savannah 30? Okay, cool. That's what I wanted. Stir. Oh, good call. Thank you. I did stir, and then I got stir for the first character. So I can just get rid of that. And because now it's just a string, anchor by Savannah. Let's only increment by 1 this time. Oh no. Ah, I forgot the test name. Test 1. I will say that's the downside of testing this app all the time, is that I've got like these saved URLs that I've hit a few times, and then it's like, oh, well, that URL doesn't exist anymore. And now we're at 31 there. Cool. So if instead we do test 2, Savannah for 1. Cool. So test 2 has a count of 1, and test 1 has a count of 31. And what we can then do is write an app, not a pass, an app dot route of CMS merge. And we'll have CMS1 and CMS2. And def merge CMS with CMS1 and CMS2. And then we'll do dest key, num keys, source keys. Okay, so this is what we did a little bit on stream with the CLIS last time that Guy and I streamed about these probabilistic data structures. So I think I can do r.cms. That was too many parentheses, dot merge. I can do CMS1 as the destination. There are two keys. The keys are CMS1 and CMS2. Weights are lists. I don't know exactly what that's expecting. So let's look at merge instead. Okay, cool, default of 1. So I'm imagining that means the multiple of each sketch. Okay, so if I wanted to, well, maybe we'll mess with that in a second. Does merge return an okay? It looks like it does, so we'll say if this return so if we do, what did I call it? CMS merge. CMS merge. Test 1 and test 2. They merged. Cool. So now, because I used CMS1 as the destination key, like CMS2, I think still exists. We can find out. But those counts should be merged. So now, hypothetically, if this wasn't, well, it's a probabilistic data structure, but that sort of loss of information really only happens when there are collisions. And because I've only added my name to this, we should still have an accurate count. So if we do CMS query, CMS query, test 1 for Savannah, we get 32. So it merged those counts together. There's no loss of information because we don't have collisions at this point. But yeah, so that's how that merge works. And it would work for a lot of CMSs, a lot of Countman sketches. You can also add weights. So if we do weights equals, let's do 1 and 3. So because CMS or test 2 has the small number of them, I'm going to do 3. So right now, test 1 has 32. If we query test 2 for Savannah, we're still at 1. If we did 3 of those, it'd be 3 merged into CMS1 or test 1. So if those weights work the way I expect, merging will get us to 35. Test 1, test 2. Cool. Query test 1 for Savannah, and we're at 35. Yeah, so those weights basically just like multiply the counts of whichever thing in the list they are respectively. So like that first weight goes to the first source, the second weight goes to the second source, and I specified here that there are 2 keys, but I could add more. this num keys is just however many sketches I'm trying to merge. That destination does have to be initialized. It doesn't have to be either of these source keys. You could initialize a new Countman sketch to be the destination key, but it does have to already be initialized, and it does have to have the right dimensions or probability if you've initialized it by probability. Yeah, so right there, all sketches must have identical width and depth. Weights can be used to multiply certain sketches. The default is 1. Cool. And then what does the info on this one give us? We get the width, the depth, and the count. Interesting. I don't know what that count is. Let's go cms.info. I called it test 1. Oh, it's 35. Okay. So if I did cms.incur by test 1, and let's see, guy's in the stream, so we'll increment guy by 5. And then if I do info, now our count's 40. Okay. Cool. What is this array reply? Oh, that's okay. It's not more information about that specific array. It's more information about a general array reply. So let's go ahead and add that command as well. We can go route for CMS info, CMS ingo, and a name. F CMS info with the name. And this is probably one where we'll have to do it says array reply. We're going to try the name thing where we're going to try and say CMS info equals, or no, oh goodness, CMS equals an empty dictionary, and CMS at width equals r.cms.info name dot width. And this is somewhat of a guess. This is based off of the fact that topk.info had this structure. We'll find out if it's right or wrong, or also I could look here real quick and see return width, depth, and total count of the sketch. That cms.info just says the array reply. Okay, yeah, so a little bit of a guess, but I'd call it an educated one. Depth equals r.cms.info name.depth CMS dict at count equals r.cms.info count, and then we'll return CMS dict. Save it all. Our Flask app restarts for us, all nice like, and we'll do CMS info on test 1. Yeah, cool. We've got a total count of 40, a depth and width of 10. That's all in line with what we're expecting. And we could just, so like we could merge these tests like a bunch of times and just keep merging them. And then if we do the info on test 1, now our count is 67, which we've got these weird weights in there, so I'm not going to do the math to try and make sure whether or not there were any collisions. I'm sort of assuming that there haven't been, just because I've only added 2 different things to our whole countman sketch. I've added Savannah and Guy and incremented those counts a bunch. Excuse me. We'd probably have to add a lot more different things to really start to see those collisions and start to see those counts become inflated or off. Yeah. So that is all of the countman sketch commands. Let's see. Any questions about top K or countman sketch? Or, I mean, you can throw it back if you've got a question about a bloom filter or a cuckoo filter, like we streamed last, well, not, yeah, the last time I was on stream was with Guy doing other probabilistic data structures. If not, I'll say follow us on Twitch so that you see all of these announcements. I'll say check out our developer site. On this developer site, you can see cool information. You can find out more about all of these probabilistic data structures. There's a lot of blog posts on there. There's good information on there for if you are a developer using Redis. I've shown our Discord already once, but join our Discord to see. We post things about when we're streaming. Discord is really the place where if you've got like a question about Redis and your code, you can go find a specific channel. Like, you know, none of us developer advocates currently are really experts in Go, but there are other people in the Discord server who are and who use Redis with Go often. So it's a great place to get more than just the five-ish developer advocates helping you out and getting eyes on your code to see if there are those people. You can subscribe on YouTube. We are also streaming live to YouTube right now. So if you follow us on, or if you subscribe to us on YouTube, you'll also be able to see all of this. And I think, let's see. I'll say, this is my Twitter. I tweeted about this live stream. It was my first tweet ever. Go follow me and you'll always know when I'm streaming. Follow Guy, who's been active in the chat helping out. He also posts a lot about when other people are streaming. He promotes us well and helps us out. So whenever he tweets about someone streaming, it's good to know. Do I have anything else at the moment for you guys? I'll show, so the site that I kept using, this site right here is redis.io/commands. If we go back to just this commands page, it's nice. You can filter by what type of Redis data structure you're using, and it will show you the commands for it. This syntax is particular to Redis CLI, like I showed, and how the return values might not be the same in all of the client libraries, but it'll give you a great starting point, and you can definitely use these commands in the CLI. And I believe with that, I'm going to hop off, about 15 minutes to spare. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you learned something about probabilistic data structures and when and where to use them and what they look like. Have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are.